Hello, today I'm going to be doing some button allocations on this new BBJ SimRacing 30 function Pro box. I'm going to be getting it set up in iRacing, which is the primary sim I use, so it makes sense that the primary setup would be in that. I'm just going to quickly go through the buttons I'm going to set up today, because for this video I've already labelled them up. So I'm just going to tell you what buttons I've got allocated and why. So if we start at the top, on the two safety toggles, I've got the pit lane limiter and the engine map plus button. Now the reason I decided to put these on the safeties is these are buttons that you don't want to hit accidentally, obviously. You don't suddenly want to find yourself doing 45 mile an hour down the straight at Le Mans, and you don't want to accidentally turn your engine into fuel saving mode, which is something I have done on a couple of occasions and not realised I've done it, which is a bit of a pain. This group of 8 buttons here, I've decided to use those to pick up the black boxes in iRacing. The black boxes in iRacing are basically sub-menus that you can look at while you're racing. So we've got the relative, lap, fuel and tyre sub boxes attached to these 4 toggles, and then the 4 click buttons on top of the encoders. I've got in-car, standings and radio. The 4th one I've not allocated to anything yet. Okay, then we go look at the encoders. I've got 3 encoders that I want to allocate stuff to today. The first one's brake bias, second one's traction control, third one's empty at the moment, and the 4th one's field of view. When you're changing from car to car, it's quite handy to be able to just change the field of view in one go without having to sub-menu it. And then at the bottom here we've got 12 general purpose buttons. I've got 4 of these I'm going to bind to something today. The reason I've not labelled up the whole box so far is because this is a complete new installation for me, and I want to make sure I get all the buttons where I want them. So I'm starting off by putting the buttons that I 100% know where I want them, and then I'm going to come back when I've allocated all those to all the boxes and finish up. Okay, here we are in iRacing, and I'm going to allocate these buttons that I've labelled up. I'm going to go through and do this quite quickly, and then I'm going to show you some of the buttons actually working on the track and in the car, and at the end I'm going to have a quick word about toggle switches, because you're going to see with these toggle switches why sometimes you need to key map them. I might cover that in this video, or I might do that in another video, I've not decided yet, or possibly even both. Anyway, let's get assigning functions, because I've been too long waiting to do this. So we need to go into options, and then find, well, I might as well just go straight into controls. We'll find a few others in different places. So here we are, black box controls. Going to assign these 7 switches to our black boxes. I mean, there are more black boxes, but these are the ones that I use regularly. So first one up is lap timing. Assign, so you just click on the box to unassign it, and then operate your switch, and that assigns it. Job done. What have we got? Standings. Done. Relative. Fuel. Tires. In-car. Radio. think that's it for black boxes. Right, let's go and sort all these other functions out. We'll go to the encoder functions next. So, brake bias. This I've set to an encoder, so you can be able to twist the encoder one way to increase it or move it forward, and the other way to decrease the value. This effectively takes up 2 switches, but they're on one knob as it's an encoder, so it's the same process. We just unassign it, and then to increase brake bias, there we go, done. And similarly to decrease brake bias or move it rearward, done. What's the next one we've got to find? Traction control. Traction control increase, done. Traction control decrease. Right. Limiter, there we go. Pit speed limiter is set to there. I'll show you in a bit the problem with doing that with a latching switch. Oh, field of view. Oh, let's need to find the toggle traction control and the throttle curve and throttle map settings. So where are they? Bear with me, listener. Right, because this car doesn't have this stuff. It wasn't very clear, but here we are. We've got fuel mixture increase and decrease, and throttle shaping increase and decrease. Right, so the throttle shaping is what I've called on here throttle curve, and that means you can change the way the throttle behaves in relation to the amount of pedal you put in. So you can make the you can make the throttle basically softer or fiercer around neutral, giving you a car that's more or less aggressive basically. So throttle shaping increase, it's throttle curve plus, throttle shaping decrease, throttle curve minus, and then fuel mixture increase. Is there, and fuel mixture decrease is there. Okay, so we've got the fuel map set and throttle curve set. So what does this leave? Nothing, I don't think. Got limiter, map, relative lap, fuel, tyres, in-car standings, radio, brake bias, traction control we haven't found yet. So, traction control toggle. This means you can just turn the traction control on and off. And then traction control increase, we're going to put on there. Traction control decrease. And that's that done. Okay, that's the whole lot. Let's stick the car on the track and have a look at some of these, how much volume we got coming from that. So the first thing I'll adjust here straight away is the field of view, and now we should be able to do that with the encoder. That's pretty cool, that's better. What I try to do on the whole is get my wheel to line up with the wheel in the cockpit, and then that gives me the most realistic, for me, view I can get. So that's pretty good for this car. So some of these are going to be easier to see than others. Let's go through the black boxes because they're easy to pick up. We've got the relative already. If I want to go to the lap timing screen, that brings that up. Fuel, tyres. These are all things that you're going to need while you're racing. In car, so you can see the things that are relevant to this car. So the two things we can change while we're actually driving this car are the brake pressure bias. So there you go, you can see that changing, and traction control. It's very handy because sometimes as your tyres wear, it's nice to be able to like just nick the traction control up 1 or 2 notches as you go along. And that should bring up the radio box. Excellent. Okay, I'm now going to try and explain the limiter and map. Right, now the issue is that toggle switches are not keyboard friendly. This means that a latching switch doesn't behave like a keyboard press, and in lots of games and sims this can cause issues. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around here and then drive down the pit lane, and I'll show you what I mean. The problem basically is that when a sim's looking for a keyboard press, it's looking for a on-off signal every time a key's pressed, and if you're sending a signal from a game controller, it effectively doesn't do that. It sends on when the key is pressed and off when the key is released. So we're heading up to the pits. Let's prime on limiter. Start of the pit lane is, and there we go, we got our limiter on, and I'm just going to drive through the pit. I'm going to leave the limiter on just so you can see that. And then when we go to switch the limiter off, nothing happens, it stays on. And then you have to operate it a second time for it to work. And that, as you can see, is not much use. So this is why we need to use key mapping to fix this issue. Funnily enough, the other switch I've got mapped here, which is engine map, the same problem actually works in our favour, because you can operate the switch to turn it from engine map 1 to engine map 2, saying you want to save fuel, and then you can close the safety and it will stay on engine map 2. So you've safetied that off again, and that's not going to cause you an issue with an accidental press. So I've got the map minus there on a push button underneath, because I don't mind accidentally giving the car more power. So then I can just press that and go back to map 1. So in that instance, this latching toggle is not going to need to be mapped, but the limiter toggle is. So let's stop this video and go and do that. Okay, so what key mapping software does is allow you to convert a game controller or a joystick input into a keyboard input. So this is really useful when your game or sim is looking for a keyboard input and you want to use a game controller input. Most commonly latching switches, or if you have older games that don't support game controllers or joysticks, or games that have a game controller limit. So if you've used up all your controller limit with your wheel and your pedals and you want to use a button box, then button mapping is the way to go. So what we need to do is find an unused keyboard press. Right, next sub camera is currently B. Well, I'm going to reassign that to a button on my new camera box. So we can unassign that, and we can use B for our limiter, pit speed limiter. There we go. So we'll unassign that, and we'll now assign that to B. Done. So now what we need to do is just get that out of the way. Is you go to SV Mapper. Right, this is a fresh SV Mapper install, and on the left here you can see every button and input that I've got going on the whole PC. So any one of these I can change from a game controller input now to a keyboard input, and this is really useful. So I know I'm in the button box here, so I'm looking for the button box interface. Now if I activate my switch, there it is, this is button 28. So then you look for the features that you want to adjust. So mapped key on press, it's 28, so double click that and that comes up yellow, and now you can press your keyboard button and that's mapped to B. Right, and what we want to do is we want this to press B when we throw the switch in both directions, so we need to map it on press and we need to map it on release. So we need to double click in here, which arms our button again, and then press B again, and now you can see that it will press B on press and press B on release, and it won't be continuous. So this is going to behave now hopefully like a keyboard switch rather than like a latching toggle switch, and hopefully iRacing will now map it correctly in game. So let's go. Alright, we need to save this, so let's save that there, and then let's go back to iRacing and see if we've fixed our button. I'm going to do a whole separate video on key mapping, because for some sims it is easier to key map all your switches, or the vast majority of your switches, like Euro Truck Simulator. I'm going to go back to Euro Truck Simulator, and I'm going to do a full profile for that, using as much key mapping as I possibly can, just because it's a lot easier in that sim than trying to use the game controller inputs, which are clunky the way it lets you allocate things, to say the least. Right, so let's see if I fixed it. I should have turned the dash off. Should have turned the dash on.
You got about 2 laps of fuel.
Right, so we stick the limiter on. Now, we're limited to 44 miles an hour, and then the limiter is off, so limiter back on. Limiter off, so that's it. That is job done. So that is brilliant. We've now, obviously we've not got all the buttons, but everything I wanted to set up on this button box is now set up, including the correct key mapping for the latching toggle switches, so everything is working correctly, and I'm very happy with that indeed. So thanks for watching, and I hope you got something out of this video, and I'll see you on the track.